What's up everybody, it's Josh back with another video. This time we will be talking about the future of Spright after this last ban list. As we all know, very dear to my heart, Ronintoadin got banned, very sad. And it's had a big impact on how Spright is being seen as like not even a top contender anymore by a lot of people. And I just want to jump in on that, give a bit of my opinion on that, because I believe that Spright is not dead. It might not end up being the best choice for an event. I haven't really made my mind up about on that yet, but I will be showcasing a couple of things that I've been testing with, that I've been experimenting with in terms of Spright. There's different versions running around the internet, and people keep asking me, what do you think of that version? How do you think that version will perform? And we're going to look at a select few versions today. We'll hop right in and I'll let you guys know what I think about them. Okay, so this is not a complete list, of course, but this is basically what's considered to be like the standard pure Spright, right? This is basically what the shell that we used before the ban list, just without Ronin. The rest of this deck was non-engine anyways, right? And the non-engine doesn't really change. You can fill this with 15 hand traps, you can fill these with 15 power spells, you can fill this with runic spells, whatever. And that's really the beauty of Spright. That is the core advantage, is that it's able to play a lot of tech cards, right? The question just is like, what does your engine still do, right? What does your normal Spright combo end on? And we're using a little helper here in the form of Bujinki Ahashima, which enables us to make Toad still. I'll show you that in a replay in a second. But basically, because we lose Ronin, the end board of this version is a lot weaker. And it's already been not the highest ceiling deck before the ban list, right? Even then, like, Tearlaments was considered to be the more powerful, the higher ceiling deck that could sometimes even break your board and just win, especially if they drew a super poly. And that is an issue that is just getting worse and worse and worse. But first, I'll just quickly show you the Arashima combo that I'm talking about, which is a combo consistent. If you draw Swap Rock and Spright Blue, there's other ways to it, as always with these Spright combos, but this is just the most simple way to show it off. The way it works is you're going to go Swap Rock, dump another Swap Rock, summon Blue, go through the motions, summon Jet, activate starter, summon red. Of course, you could be grabbing a Smashers here if you wanted it, if you drew the red, but in this version we're going to be choosing the red because we want to play through some hand traps, of course. And here it gets a little different, because here we use the Swap Rock to return to our hand. Now, why do we do this? Is because Bujinki Ahashima summons two monsters, one from your hand, one from your grave, with the same level, and then you immediately exceed someone with them, right? And so because we dumped the Swap Rock earlier, we bring back a swap from the grave, summon the swap from the hand, and make a Toad here. And Bujinki Arashima has the drawback that he can't be used as link material at all. But since we haven't used Gigantic yet, we can simply overlay, right? We overlay into Gigantic. In this version, I am currently summoning a Nimble Beaver, simply because we don't have that card in rotation at this point of the game. And once our Toad goes to the graveyard, because adding back a Swap Rock without a Ronintoadin isn't the greatest follow-up, I think summoning a Nimble Beaver here is good. Because then once this is in the graveyard, we can add it back with Toad for relatively strong follow-up. I think that is a decent interaction in this version of the deck. Now, we haven't gone into Elf yet. We're gonna summon an Elf, makes our Toad targeting protected, and here we summon back a Spright Red, and that's basically the end to this combo. Now, it's weaker than before. We have less follow-up. We have played into Super Poly because both Elf and Red are fire, which is something we tried to prevent in last format, where we would just use extra bodies we had. Because of Ronintoadin, we would have one extra body. This would be an IP Masquerena, or it could be in some lines it could be a Djinn Buster, two cards that are dark, making this not as vulnerable to Super Poly. Now, because this combo does send a Nimble Beaver, I do think it has decent follow-up, depending on, of course, we have three other cards in our hand. So it is not dead, this pure version of Spright, because, I mean, going back to the list, of course, you have like plenty of ways to tech this version to beat the decks in the format. You can play like a bunch of hand traps to counter Tearlaments, you can play a bunch of board breakers. It depends also a lot on what Tearlament players are going to do, right? Are they going to still play for Eradicator and Spell Canceller, in which case you can't really play power spells, right? You'd need to play some amount of hand traps, which is really a general rule of thumb when trying to build Spright for the next format. There is no clear-cut best Spright version. It's just really dependent on what Tearlaments are going to do, right? There's another version I want to talk about, which we can move right into, because this is not a full deck list. I have some full deck lists prepared. The next one I want to talk about is a version of Runick Sprite, which is something I've played on stream a lot. I've showcased a deck profile for it last format, and the caveat for this is really just, if Eradicator and Spell Canceller aren't that popular, I think this is a quite good approach to Spright. Now, the list I'm sharing here is nothing super new. People that have been watching my stream have already seen this to an extent. I've changed a couple of things since, but this is my current approach to Runick Sprite. Keep in mind, with every single deck list shown in this video, these are also my first ideas, my first approaches. Like, I'm not spoon feeding you like a perfect YCS deck list here. I'm just giving you the tools to, you know, start testing and also point out the disadvantages and advantages of each individual version, right? But this is a list I've been enjoying. The goal of this deck is basically we don't bother going for Toad, because the lines that lead to Toad are, as you saw in the last video, very inefficient and just feel a little weird compared to how good they felt last format. And this is a deck that tries to abuse the Runick cards to summon level 2 extenders and draw a bunch of cards. We mix that with Iperia and Capshell, which Iperia on summon draws a card, Capshell draws a card when it's used as a link material or detached from an XYZ monster to activate the effect. Keep in mind, this does not work with Gigantic Sprite, because Gigantic Sprite specifically does not detach for cost, so you don't get to draw from Capshell, which is why Iperia is the better card, which is why we're running 3 Iperia and 1 Capshell. So the idea is basically we use the sprites to set up some decent boards and facilitate a lot of drawing cards alongside the Runick cards and the Iperia and the Capshell. We are able to draw a lot of cards every turn, both on our turn and our opponent's turn, and we draw into a lot of hand traps, we draw into a lot of follow-up, and we draw into a lot of the Runick cards, which is really what you're trying to do, right? You want to draw Runick cards into Runick, you want to chain fountain draws and use the Runick cards to disrupt the opponent and at some point just gain control over the game. That's what this deck's trying to do. The extra deck's relatively tight. I believe you need to run 3 Hugin. As far as some of the main deck choices goes, I have decided to cut down on some Sprite cards. As you'll notice, it's a relatively small Sprite package. I'd argue this is more of a Runick deck than a Sprite deck, to be honest, but it's been working out quite nicely. The idea of taking out some of the Sprite cards came when I was testing this deck, and I was just like, whenever I was drawing Runick cards, I was very happy. I just wanted to play as many Runick cards as possible. And the way it goes, if you draw like 3 or 4 Runick cards, you're gonna draw into the sprites eventually. Like, you're not gonna need to open a Sprite Blue or Jet in your opening hand. You're gonna draw 1, 2, 3 cards with the Runick cards. You have Iperia, you have Capshell. You draw a bunch of cards. You only need to see one of these to get going, because one of them pulls out the other ones. You don't even need to see any of them. If you draw like an Iperia and a Runick spell, you can go like Gigantic Summon Blue instead of summoning the Capshell. It's totally fine. So the reason why there's 2 Blue and 2 Jet is just we want some sort of follow-up throughout the second turn, right? But mainly we use these to turn our 1 Runick Fusion into like a decent Sprite board if we just draw any of the level 2 accesses in this deck. And from that point on, it's very grindy. It just tries to outgrind the opponent with repeated like hard drawing, Iperia, Capshell, Runick cards, all that kind of good stuff. It's very grindy. I enjoy it a lot. However, if you play against a lot of like, I don't know, Lunalight tier or Danger tier that all try to Eradicator and spell cancel you, you might not have the greatest time with this deck. But in another situation where people are playing, I don't know, hand traps or slower versions of Tearlaments, this deck might be fine. I personally haven't made my mind up yet on whether I want to bring this type of deck to a tournament yet, because I mean, as far as I'm seeing a lot of people move away from Eradicator, but there's still a decent amount of people that do it. So yeah, I'm kind of iffy on this one, but it's very fun and I think actually quite good. I don't have a replay for this one simply because it plays so differently every time. If you want to see this deck in action, I recommend tuning into the stream from time to time, because I have played this deck a lot. Even checking out the VODs from last week, you'll see me play almost this exact list for a decent amount of time if you want to look into it. For all the other decks that I'm about to show you, I have some replays lined up though, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about each individual version. But this one, brief summary, very grindy. I like the playstyle a lot. I think it's very good if people don't go for Eradicator and Spell Cancel too often. Next up, we have something that I'm being asked about a lot. Spright Tri-Brigade. Tri-Brigade Sprite is a version that I've been talking about before when people asked me, okay, what happens if Toad gets banned? What can we do? And Spright Tri-Brigades has been on my mind because they have some decent synergy. I'll show you a combo in a second. The deck has a decent amount of room for a non-engine. You get to play Droplets. I feel like Droplets is fine in this. I haven't quite pointed out whether I like Droplet or not in this upcoming meta. It seems fine in decks that can play it. I just wanted to try it. The downsides of this version are basically, it plays a lot like just a Tri-Brigade deck, I'd argue. Like the end board is quite strong. I'll show you. The going first combos are quite strong. Going second in terms of board breaking capabilities is not the strongest. It also suffers a decent amount from Abyss Dweller, which is, I feel like, gonna be a popular card, which makes me maybe not want to play this deck, but the combos are pretty cool. And just to showcase how efficient some of these combos are, this is the one. Just one fractal will lead to a decent end board. I'll show you. We're going to use the fractal. We're going to dump Kit, dump Nerval, add Keras. Normal summon Keras, banish 1 from the graveyard to summon the new card from Power of the Elements, Lightheart. The effect doesn't matter. It's just that's a link 1 Beast Warrior is very good for Tri-Brigades. And then these two make, is basically a 1-card Sprite Elf. And then we bring back the kit that we haven't used yet. Use the kit, banish 2 to summon a Bearbrum. Now here, we're going to have to discard 2 cards from our opening hand, which, I mean, we've only used Fractal here, so we should be good on discarding 2 cards. We bring back the Nerval that we haven't used yet from the banished pile, and we will overlay the Elf and the kit into a Gigantic Sprite. We will detach from the Gigantic Sprite to summon blue into Jet, add Smashers. Now here there's different variations of the combo. I decided to just go for a Djinn Buster. Some people have been going for the Melfi XYZ just to add Melfi Playhouse, which is a trap card that bounces, which I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to include that in the main deck because it's another brick, but you can do that. I decided to go for Djinn Buster. We use the Nerval here because we haven't yet to summon a double Dragon Lord, and we turn the Bearbrum and the Nerval into a Pit Knight early. The Bearbrum now adds us a Revolt, which requires us to put back another card from our hand. So although this is just a 1-card Fractal combo, it requires 2 discards for Bearbrum and 1 putback for the Revolt Surge. So we're gonna end up with just 1 card in hand after this entire thing, but the board is quite strong. You have Revolt, Smasher, Djinn Buster, DDL Bounce, and Pit Knight early. Now you're wondering, oh, but you don't have enough spaces to use the Revolt. The way you're going to do that is you're going to use the Djinn Buster at some point. You can then use the Dragon Lord to just free up 1 slot, and then you're going to use the Smashers for the other slot. You have now room for 4 to bring back the 4 Tri-Brigades required for you to summon Shureg. So you basically have 2 banishes, a bounce, the Pit Knight early negate, and the Djinn Buster negate. It's quite a lot of interruptions. The combo is quite strong. Still, out of all the versions I've played so far, why is this my least favorite one? It just felt like it was more of a Tri-Brigade deck than a Sprite deck. It feels kind of underpowered. At breaking boards, it wasn't that great. The combos are cool, but to some extent they play into certain hand traps that the normal Sprite combos shouldn't play in. It doesn't feel great into Dweller. It doesn't feel great into Shifter either. That's another big deal. I mean, a lot of people are going to play Shifter next format, I think, because Tearlament is going to be very popular. That's another weakness of this deck. The extra deck is super tight, as you can see down here. You don't have a lot of flex spots. The extra deck clearly shows that this is more of a Tri-Brigade deck than a Sprite deck, really. The space issues are tough. You do get to play a decent amount of hand traps, and you have room for like some more non-engine even. It's quite cool. I encourage you to try it out. The combos are a little complicated in the beginning, but it is a decent deck. I'll say that. It's a decent deck, especially at going first. But overall, I was still preferring some other Sprite versions more. And then last but not least, one version that like I felt decent about, Twin Sprite, right? Which that's probably also a very obvious one that a lot of people have been trying out. I will say right off the bat, this deck can also summon Toad on the first turn by including either the 2 Swap Frogs and the Bujinki Ahashima, or you include a second Life Twin Kisikil Frost, because this one is Aqua. So the way you can make Toad is relatively obvious. If you summon Lila and summon a Kisikil Frost, you can leave that Kisikil Frost on the board, keep playing with like blue and stuff, and then you just make a Gigantic and summon the second Kisikil Frost from the deck and make a Toad. The reason why I ended up taking that out of my deck is because this deck does not run a single water monster. So this Toad made with 2 Kisikil Frosts, yes, it's 2 negates with the Elf, but if your opponent breaks this board, you have 0 follow-up. You don't get a single add back from the Toad. It's been very, very awkward for me in general. With the Swap Frogs, it's a little bit better, but even then, adding back 1 Swap Frog or even both is not the greatest way of grabbing follow-up, which is why I decided to take this out altogether and just go for, you know, I'll show you a replay once again. Standard combo, you have Lila and blue. You go Lila, summon Kisikil Frost, summon blue, go for Jet, add starter, summon red. There's like different sequencing here. It doesn't really matter what you do. This is also the reason why I'm using specifically Iperia as a one-off in this deck, is because if you don't really have a great summon here off of Gigantic. You can run Iperia, you can run a second Kisikil Frost, you can run the 2 Swap Frogs. I chose Iperia here. The amount of non-engine that we play right here, I figured the Iperia draw was very valuable, right? And because we don't run Prosperity anyways in this one, because we draw cards with the Evil Twins, I figured going for Iperia is good. So here you summon Iperia, and you'll go for the Elf, bring back whatever. You don't have to bring back the Lila here. You can bring back the blue and make a Djinn Buster, but I decided to not do that in this line of play. I'll show you what I end up on. I make an IP. This IP could be by reviving another Dark instead of the Lila. You can make a Djinn Buster here. And then at the end of the combo, because these lock you into Fiend, at the end of the combo you want to go into the Evil Twins, right? You go for Kisikil first. Kisikil revives the Lila, and that makes this Lila Link, and you bring back the Kisikil Link, which now draws you a card. because when it's summoned, if you control the Lila, you draw a card. I just added 2 hand traps here to see how many cards we draw with throughout the combo, and then we link these 2 off into another one of the pink. The cool things about this board is it does not have a good super poly target. You have fire, light, and dark. There's no way to super poly this deck effectively. You can do some cool stuff. The Kissy Kill can bring back the Lila to pop a card. The IP can go into something like an Unchained Abomination in response to that to pop another card. The Elf can revive Iperia to draw another non-engine card. You can also revive the red that you have in the graveyard for an additional negate. It's quite the interactive version because it also gets to run a lot of non-engine. Now, this combo is very strong. I think out of the ones that I've showcased is the best turn 1 board you want to try and make. You can try the Swap Frog or the second Kissy Kill to maybe go for a Toad instead of the Masquerena. You can try that, just throwing the idea out here. But I think the biggest strength of Spright is that it gets to run a lot of tech cards, a lot of hand traps, power spells, whatever you want in this upcoming format. You can really tutor Spright to beat whatever is in the meta. And I think that's going to be the deciding factor, is like what's going to be popular, which kind of tech cards can I play to counter that. And that's why I like these decks that try to draw cards, right? The Runick or the Life Twin in general, the Iperia, the Cap Shell. These types of things I think are quite strong, because I think if you can use Spright as an engine to facilitate drawing into your deck, drawing into your non-engine, that is quite cool. That is why I liked this version and the Runick version a lot more than the others, because I felt like the sheer power of Spright just doesn't seem enough. So using Sprites to draw deeper into your deck seemed like the best deal for me. As far as this version goes, it gets to play enemy and droplet really, really well. They have great synergy with the Life Twins, because if you summon one of the Life Twins and they try to negate them, you can just send them away with droplet and then you summon the other one and that still triggers, right? Because at that point, once again, it's the only monster you have, so that's quite neat. What was the stuff that I didn't like about this version? This version felt very, very weak if you didn't draw a Life Twin card, because you just don't really have a great end goal in mind when you start to combo off. Like, let's say you have a Spright starter but no Life Twins, it doesn't really work, because summoning one Life Twin off of Gigantic doesn't get you anywhere, which is why I'm already playing a higher Life Twin count as usual as the decks that I've seen. I'm running triple Lila, triple Sunny Snitch, and the Kissy Kill, so 7 basically to start off the combos. But even that wasn't enough. You can play Secret Passcode that adds the Sunny Snitch, but at some point if you draw too many of them, it's also awkward. So that's the one thing that I was missing, right? Because like that's the other thing that was so good before. As long as you got to a Gigantic Spright, you would just summon, swap, send Ronin, make Elf, bring back, you'd always have double Toad Negate, even off of the simplest combo. Whereas this deck doesn't really have that, right? This deck doesn't really have that. If you don't see the Life Twins, you can't go into the Life Twin engine, and you don't really have any great backup plans. So another reason why I really wanted Iperia as a one-off in this deck, because if I don't draw Life Twins, I don't have a good summon target for Gigantic. So let's say I have starter, no Life Twins, I can just go starter, summon blue, summon Jet, add another starter or Smasher, right? And then I can go Gigantic, summon Iperia, draw a card, make Elf, revive something, and then on the opponent's turn, revive Iperia again, so I at least get to draw 2 cards from my Gigantic Sprite, so I can draw some hand traps maybe, right? But yeah, that was the biggest weakness of this deck, is sometimes not seeing Life Twins, or then drawing too many Life Twins because I added a couple more to, you know, solve problem number 1. This version is solid, I think. But yeah, I don't think this deck should be going for Toad, even though, like I mentioned, it can. Yeah, anyways, this has already gotten quite long. I hope my editor can cut it down a little bit so it's not like a 25-minute banger or something. But I hope you found this insightful. These are my thoughts on the versions that I've been testing. If your version of Spright is not included in this video, it's either because I didn't like it enough or because I haven't seen it or tested it yet. So my offer to you, trade offer, if you have anything in mind that you want to ask me about, any Spright versions, leave it in the comments down below. I'll let you know what I think about it, or maybe do a follow-up video. On top of that, let me know if you would like to see the same for Tearlament. If you enjoyed this and you thought this was helpful, let me know. I can do the same thing for Tearlaments. And I was also thinking about doing the same thing for all kinds of rogue decks, right? You know, because a lot of people have asked me, is this deck now viable? Is that deck now viable? If you want these types of videos more often, leave feedback in the comments down below. It really helps. And if you liked it and found it helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out the Twitch link in the descriptions below, where I've played almost all of these decks for a bunch of hours on stream this week. Without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.